All right, everybody, I'm James.
Hi, I'm Wesley.
This is the Central Intelligence Pro. We brought up on our last episode the Japan Airlines cargo flight in around 1986 with a UFO spotting, and then we kind of tapered off into one of the letters that was brought up about Sasquatch. For the record, we're not doing that. We're going to go over like the intro to the UFO spotting of 3 parallel unidentified flying air traffic is what they called it back in 1986.
Yeah, so this is going to be about, it was a flight that was, it says it's supposed to be going from, where does it say?
It was Anchorage, Alaska.
Yeah, it was going from I cannot pronounce his name, but Reykjavik to Anchorage. And
Reykjavik.
They were flying at about 35,000 feet, and they happened to see something. At first, the pilots and the crew kind of played it off as glare in the canopy, which it does happen there because you have the sun and the northern lights and everything being up north. But They noticed that it wasn't sitting still, it was moving.
And to be more specific, it was three in the records we have say that it was 3 flying parallel. And so it's actually a big story that took off. They released it, and we're just gonna hit on a few hot topics of it and see where it goes from there.
Yep. So the thing is like whenever they notice it and they realize that it is 3 different objects that was kind of following the plane, they called to the tower in Anchorage, and the Anchorage tower told them to make what is that word? Evasive maneuvers to get away from it. And so they did. So they decided to do evasive maneuvers. They dropped a significant amount of feet and everything, and they realized that these 3 objects were faster than them by a lot.
I'm not mistaken, in some of the reports, it was actually as though they were being followed, which actually I think there was a couple of letters that stated they were being followed by these 3 objects flying parallel to each other, tailing this flight from it's Reykjavik to Anchorage.
Yeah, so it says that they got followed for 640 kilometers or about 400 miles. But the thing that's really weird about it is there was 2 other planes nearby. There was Flight 1628, a United Airlines, and an Air Force C-130 cargo plane that did not see the objects on their radar.
They denied it, however, made reference that the pilots were not under any influence of anything, and like drinking or anything like that. They commented that everybody was sober essentially, and then blessed it off as just some kind of interference. And in short, like they were just seeing things on the radar because of you have the aurora borealis, the weird magnetic fields up there because it kind of messes up instruments. But we have all these letters we were talking about in the last episode, and brings up a little bit more detail as to like why do all these people want to know about what happened here, and we'll play more into that a good reason why that would be, but we'll get into that in a latter episode.
Yeah. So the big issue with this whole situation is when they landed in Anchorage, Alaska. They all got debriefed and everything, and the problem was they all kind of had different stories. So that's where it kind of gets tricky with, is this true or not? They all did say that there was UFOs and everything, but they all had different, I guess you could say different, like, not explanations, but like different sightings. Like they've seen something different. It wasn't crazy, like anything crazy difference, but they all said that there were 3 different objects. But they all also said that they were kind of different. They were different shapes and they were different colors. They did different things. So it's kind of a weird, like, we don't know if they're lying, but it's one of those, like, people did take it seriously because they are pilots. Pilots are not supposed to lie. They're supposed to be honest about everything. So it's kind of one of those things, like, it's probably real. And it's just one of those things, like, in the moment, you're probably terrified because you see 3 different objects, and this is during, like, kind of right after the Cold War and everything. You're pretty close to Russia, so you're kind of worried. Like, you you hoped it's not like anything like military or anything, so you're worried that you might get shot down.
Not to mention, you have a giant aircraft that, well, in all honesty, is quite a bit of money. It's most common. And then obviously you have all these people's lives at the tips of your, like at your fingertips.
It's a cargo plane. So
cargo plane. Never mind. It was a cargo plane.
So it was a couple. It should be a couple of what are they called? The load masters, and it should have been a couple pilots that was on board.
But you have these pilots, some of the best trained individuals in their field, because you're flying a cargo plane. So that means you're going to be in charge of a certain amount of money from getting from point A to point B. And now you have these three. In 1986, they identified it as 3 unidentified flying air traffic. Not UFO. That term was coined later on in the timeline. But it's just interesting that you have all these people curious or interested in what they saw, and then we'll go more into like the regions where at the time where a lot of these sightings for these UFO that we know of that are UFOs today in the regions, and then it's just a curious question as to why they would say this, and then why somebody would say no, it wasn't anything. So
this is the FAA's report, like word for word. It says the FAA released a data package of the incident characterizing Tarachi as a UFO repeater, having reported 2 other UFO sightings prior to November 17th and 2 more this past January. In January 11, 1987, UFO sightings reported by Tarachi in the same general area as Flight 1628. He stated he saw irregular pulsing lights and a large black chunk just in front of us. The FAA radar did not confirm an object, and it was later determined to have been lights from small villages being diffused by thin clouds of ice crystals. Class notes that Tarachi used the words spaceship or mothership in his reports and claimed that the mothership did not want to be seen. Tarachi also claimed that we humans will meet them in the near future. So it's kind of like one of those that we don't know if it's for sure like real, because like the FAA said, he's a UFO repeater, meaning that he has reported multiple times about UFOs. So it's like when you look at UFOs sightings and in general, like UFO reports, the people that don't want to talk about it are usually the ones that are telling the truth. The people that come out and say, oh yeah, the UFO came, like that are willing to talk about it, they're wanting to talk about it, usually are not. They're usually doing it for publicity or money. They're not telling the truth.
And before we decided to actually record this episode, we were actually going back and forth as to in the last episode, you should recall, there are these phenomenons that happen in certain timelines about certain specific topics. In this one in particular, we're talking about an unidentified flying object. But there's this phenomenon, if anybody really actually pays attention, because we do a lot of research on this stuff, there are certain...
I'm shaking the camera.
I'm shaking the camera, sorry guys.
Yeah.
There are certain events that are left out, and those are the events that we like to look into. So why are they saying this actually isn't that much of a big deal, but then you have this individual say, we will see them in the future? Why did he say that?
Yeah.
Was there some encounter? Was there, and therein lies what we like to do is exploit those conspiracies.
So the big thing that when we're reading a couple of the letters kind of to ourselves and stuff, which we're going to make probably a couple part series. We're going to read every letter to y'all so y'all can kind of have all the information we have. Like, yeah, it's going to be kind of boring, like long term, like just us reading and stuff. But we want you to have all that information. But in one of the letters, it specifically says that we know that you have pictures of the radar, like the blips on the radar. But in this report, the FAA says we don't have any report. We didn't see anything on the radar. So why did somebody from this time say, hey, you have pictures and reports and you said you did, but we're in 2024 right now and the report says we didn't have anything? So did they release saying they did have pictures, and then they kind of backtracked and try to cover that have covered it up over the 40 years. Because that's the problem, is like back then there wasn't internet, so people couldn't like throw it on the internet and be like, yeah, they're lying, blah blah. So it's one of those, it's like crazy, is like we know now that it's like one of those, like it's probably like the FAA is probably trying to hide their tracks, because what we know of UFOs today, from the 40s to 2012, the Air Force, everybody just kind of wanted to cover it up. They didn't want the world to know. They kind of treated the civilians as children. They didn't want them to know. So that's why in 2012 they started releasing, saying, yeah, UFOs are real. We do have sightings. They came out and told everybody about Project Blue Book, which we will do a deep dive episode on Project Blue Book. But it's one of those, like, when you read reports and stuff from back then, most of it's going to be lying, because that's what their job was.
Well, it could be potential lying, but the big topic here, and it's not specifically one branch or the other, but it's apparent, because if you follow these phenomenons, as I said earlier, it's like an event happened, and then now there's this information to kind of like push that event off and kind of brush it under the carpet. And you know, in a sense, if you go up to these branches or whoever classifies it as no, that's not what happened, they may or may not be trying to say that we're lying, but it definitely seems as though they're trying to keep us, or allow a specific amount of information. But the real big topic, or that blank space I like to talk about, the blips, as he said, or the ones we like to talk about, primarily because it makes people uncomfortable, and two, like I said, we just want to give you guys a different perspective. And for this one, there is a lot of letters. Yes, it's not actually like concrete proof of something, but it's also one of those things that the questions arise. Why would all these people be requesting this information, or why are they talking about it? And then why is it mostly in these regions? And then Wes hit it on the head. At this time, I mean, most people, like, there was no social media, there was no phone, so the way you contacted somebody was like radio. You listen to the radio. You have up and coming. You have landlines.
Yeah, there's landlines and stuff like that. There was no social media, so you could call each other, but like it didn't spread like wildfire like today. Like today, you post something on social media, 1 billion people will see it in a minute. Back then, it was this was like basically the very beginning of internet. People didn't have computers and stuff like that. And when they finally did, like, most of these people that were talking about this kind of stuff were kind of shut off. They were crazy. They were weirdos. Like, people did not want... And the problem is like, I've noticed in a lot of like different documentaries. So like, I've been watching The Phenomenon. It's by James Fox. It's a super good documentary. He's probably the best UFO researcher I can think of. And he does everything to do with UFOs and stuff like that. But in all of his stuff, I've noticed that the people that come out finally after 50, 60 years, they all said the same thing. When I got briefed by Project Blue Book, they basically told me to not go out and tell anybody. And if I did, I would get shamed and I would get fired.
So he brings up a good point. You have these two, let's classify them in two groups, okay? You have a group that doesn't want to say anything because of fear of retaliation. And then you have a group that says, yeah, I'll talk about it. I'll say whatever you want, because, you know, there were incentives at that point. And in this time, the primary source of income was more than likely just crops or something simple like that. And then you have all these sightings in the majority of the regions where, like, you would get that source of income, where you have really, good assets to grow these things. But at the same time, you have to wonder, why would you just blatantly come out and be like, hey, yeah, this is what happened? And then at the same time, you have these individuals who are like, yeah, I don't want to talk about it. This part of the spectrum is what we like to talk about, because we want to know what actually happened and what happened to make them not want to talk about it. So he brought up a good point. There was something, or some organization or something out there saying, hey, this is what happens if you're going to talk about it, because more than likely those incidents were probably true. Similar to a lot of these circumstances, and of course, over the time from whenever the first spotted UFO was until now, and I'm sure there's a more than enough amount of individuals who do it, but at the same time, you have the same story. Somebody didn't want them to talk about it, and there was fear of retaliation. That's it.
So the big thing for me is these letters that we have. I will admit we got them from the National Archives, and the thing is for me is, why would the National Archives hold all of these letters? Why? Why would you hold all these letters when, if you're going to call it a hoax, you would throw it away? You would just shred them, you'd throw them away, you'd burn them. You're not going to keep them around, because if it's a hoax, why keep them? If it's real, then you keep them and you basically try to cover them up. You hide them in different files and different spots, and then you just kind of keep them kind of hidden in the back.
And so, and of course, there's going to be those groups of individuals who are like, so when was this information released? Blah, blah, blah. So it's all fake. But at the same time, what was the purpose, like the purpose of actually releasing this information? Because if you want to go into regulations, information that's not supposed to be told about or is classified doesn't get released until 25 years after it has been classified as classified or secret. But at the same time, how did this information get out, and why did it get out? So you go into UFOs, that's a big one we like to talk about. You know, sure, there could be some aliens out there. We like to think they are, but they're obviously a complex society in which we don't know about, because, and we'll hit on this topic way more against civilizations over the past time, because we're big historians. And then you have civilizations that sort of just kind of fall off the radar. But how did they, were this flourishing, prosperous civilization, and now they're gone? On like a blink of an eye. So what happened? There had to have been something going on at that time. And you're talking about civilization, like all the way back to the Aztecs. Like, why did they disappear? We'll go into that probably at some point. I'm not going to brief into that, but it's just case in point. What happened, and why is there no record of it?
Yeah, so that's the big thing, is like, when with what we know today, and what, like, when UFOs started getting really popular was the 1940s. Roswell is probably your biggest start to UFOs. But why did it happen right after the atom bomb? That's the big question that a lot of people have, is why were they coming around after the atom bomb? Are they here to try to tell us to watch out, to be careful, not to use nuclear weapons? Or are they here watching us basically as like a science experiment? Like, see what the humans are going to do?
It's definitely a good perspective, but it's gonna hurt, because you have to understand, at what point do you have to ask yourself, why are these people not here? And then how do they just all of a sudden, there's no record anymore? It's all gone. So what happened? And that's a lot of the stuff that we like to talk about, is giving you a way to think about it, or sort of investigate on your own time. It's like, what happened?
We like to give a different opinion, because most people, like, when you hear about anything UFO, you got two sides of the story: either hard believers or hard disbelievers. There's no real in between. That's where we want to be, the in between. Don't get me wrong. In my opinion, I 1,000% solely believe UFOs are real. I believe aliens are real. There's almost an impossible chance that they're not real, because we have a vast solar system that we basically can't even fathom how big it is. We're so small as human beings on planet Earth, and there's no reason that aliens don't exist, because the chances of life on Earth, like, being like not only being here on Earth, it's kind of dumb to believe just that.
You have to think about the universe in its entirety, and what we like to think about. And one of my perspective is, like, we don't even have satellites that can go as far as like, because what is space? It's eternal. It goes on and it just keeps going on, and we are just a perspective point of view to like look at it is we are a grain of salt in like this entire beach of sand, and all these little grains of salt are different areas in the universe. So there's got to be something or someone or something out there more than just us. There's no way it's just Earth, human beings in the history of humans, and then you have evolution, which I mean, you got to ask the question, like, what else is there? And then the big one, and what we like to do is, I like to say, test the waters. We like to ask why, and nobody else, not a lot of people like to ask why. So it's a very small community, but we just want to, I mean, and we'll give credit where credit's due. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we'll we're not always going to be against what, like, the common thought is. Like,
to be honest, we're with certain things and aspects, we will say, like, we'll admit, like, we do believe, and we're never going to say we don't believe in something, because I'm willing to give anything and everything a fair chance as long as there's evidence on the table.
Mm-hmm.
So, like,
prove
Bigfoot.
Just prove it.
I believe that Bigfoot's real. There's evidence on the table. Like, yeah, we don't have crazy clear photos or DNA or anything like that, but there is enough evidence there to believe something's there. The same thing with, like, so I'm from Texas. Our big thing, we don't have Bigfoots really. We have Chupacabra, and that's a big, well-known cryptid in Texas, and there is evidence and pictures of them. So it's like, what is it? It might not be a Chupacabra. It could be anything. Like, it could be some kind of animal, but we don't know until we can find out, like, more information. And that's where, like, we like to deep dive into stuff. Like, we're not going to just sit there and be like, if you come to us and be like, oh yeah, like, Chupacabra's real, and if you don't give us evidence, we're going to kind of be like, but, like, if you hand us, like, evidence, like, even if it's papers, or you had a dad that had a sighting and wrote it in a journal, and you gave us that journal, I will read it wholeheartedly, read every bit of it. I'm not going to throw evidence away.
Story time.
Yeah. Like, that's the thing for us. We're about to do probably a 3 or 4 part series on reading just these letters. We want you to have the evidence. Yeah, you might not like these episodes, but we want to at least give them to you for the people that do like to listen to that.
And then, granted, we may not get to all of them because we're literally, like, this is going to sort of exact our point, for lack of better words. There are literally, like, thousands of letters from this one specific issue, which was the what they called at the time UFAT, or as we know as UFO sighting, within a year of it actually happening. So within that 1 year of this thing happening, plus we have reading on the topic, these same airlines were spotting the same thing. Yeah. So at multiple times. So what is the phenomenon fake? Maybe. Is it not? I think it's actually real, because why would you have all these things talking about this one specific topic and it not be real?
So another thing is, and I know some of you might get onto us about saying UFO, because in today's time they changed it from unidentified flying object to UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon. So I'm just giving you UFO because that's what the term was in the 1980s.
But you see, over time, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It has changed. It's derived through different names. So exactly. and then it's just interesting because, I mean, no, we're not trying to be like, hey, everything you believe is fake. We're just trying to give you ideas of, like, why it can't be fake.
Exactly. Like, because, like, we know that not every UFO, like, sighting story is going to be real. It's just impossible to believe, because you got to think, like, there's so many people in this world that just want to be popular, or they just want money, or they want, like, that, just kind of being that known person.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why, like, I like to listen to the stories from people that have never came out about it. For instance, like, yeah, that dude we read about last episode with the letter, like, he's like, yeah, I've never said it, but, like, seen Bigfoot before, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, those are the people that I do want to read, because they never told anybody.
Exactly. So, and essentially, and I gave this a sort of example to us earlier, as we were, and honestly, we're just trying to figure out how to start this episode, because it's
tricky.
It's tricky. It's a tricky one. You have all this evidence about this one specific sighting. Well, not really even evidence. It's just requests for the information, because at some point, all these people think that this thing happened. And then that one little skew on this scatter plot of events talks about Bigfoot. So you have everybody talking about this almost seems like bandwagon ideal, but now you have this one person talking about something that we didn't really elaborate on until later on in the years afterwards, and then therefore those are those how do I say this, exigent circumstances, or those unique incidents. Those are that little unique incident is the ones we're going to be going into.
Yeah, exactly. That's where it's like we need to kind of figure out like everything about UFOs. Like we want to, like, this is a pretty big like mainstream story in the 80s, but to be 100% honest with you, I didn't hear about this story until a couple years ago. So it kind of died off after probably, I would say, the early 90s. It was gone. It was completely wiped away because the 80s, it was super popularized. Everybody was trying to figure out information. The FAA wouldn't give anybody any information. They were just kind of blowing it off, saying it wasn't real, nothing was real.
They had an answer for every event, but those answers were actually inconclusive, or just almost like a fallback to try to get over the subject and move on to a different thing because they didn't want to talk about it for some reason. And then again, that reason is why we like to exploit those reasons, is because why.
But the thing is, with this story alone, why I was pretty interested in it is Project Blue Book was a pretty big like UFO Air Force like program, and why would those people go and talk to this pilot? Because these people, yes, like they know just about anything. They have all the evidence they can, and they never will probably ever release it. And it sucks to say that, but why would they go to a false claim if they know it's a false claim?
And I believe what Wes is hitting on here is, why would you put this much effort into something that you want to say doesn't matter? So you waste all these resources into covering up a situation, yet you guys, or whoever it is, this entity wants to say, nah, it doesn't actually happen. But why did you go and put forth all this effort into making sure, like, what exactly happened? And then now all of a sudden you're going to say it doesn't happen.
Exactly. And that's like the big issue is, why spend probably millions, to be honest, of dollars,
countless man hours
covering this story, like covering it up and being like, yeah, all these news reports, all these newspapers, all these radio shows are all liars. They're lying to us. Like, when in reality, it could be real. Do I know it's real? No. But, and that's the thing, is like, why spend so much time covering something up when a significant group of people, you had the FAA investigate, the Project Blue Book investigate, the military investigate, all these people for something that you say it's fake.
The military specifically, and I'm not gonna call out any branches because I'm in the military. So
yeah, we're both in the military.
But you have a branch of the military saying they were in the area at the same time and they didn't see anything on their radars, and essentially the same sort of sector, I guess you could call it.
Yeah, because they said that there was 3 airlines and only one of them saw it. Like, the Japanese airline saw it, and then the United Airlines pilot said he didn't see anything, and there was a C-130 aircraft, like a military C-130, flying around and said he didn't see anything on his radar. But like in one of the letters, I wish we would have we had it on us, but we don't. Like, we'll read it to y'all in like the next couple episodes, but in one of them literally says, like, one of the guys is asking for the photos of the radar. So why would they ask it if supposedly there was no radar evidence? It's
essentially the same pattern. You have all the, and you'll see a lot of it's from some of the same individual over and over again. But they're requesting, so here's the big one, video and pictures of radar imaging of the phenomenon sighted on that day. And it's not a like verbatim phenomenon. That's just what we call it, because it's just a significant event. And then at the same time, you have these people saying, yeah, there wasn't anything. But whose word are you going to take for it? You're going to take some commercial airliner, or are you going to take a government-funded organization such as a branch of the military? And like, whose word are you going to take over it? Like,
Yeah, because
regardless of this, they probably have the same training, but whose word is going to be valued more?
It's hard to say because back in the day, the military was covering up UFOs, and they admitted it. In 2012, they admitted they were covering up UFOs. But it's like, it's hard to, like, when you look at old files from the 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s, it's hard to believe the military because now we know they were covering it up.
So therein lies where we probably will potentially excel in these future podcasts, because therein lies the exact definition of what we like to talk about, which is a conspiracy.
Mm-hmm. But this is we'll kind of wrap it up now, but I want to kind of leave you on a question, kind of like, do you believe that this story is real, or do you believe it's fake?
We have the pilot of that same flight, and I will bring back what he said. We will see them in the future. Why did he say that?
I don't know.
All right, with that, I'm James.
I'm Wesley.
And this is the Central Intelligence Bros.
Thank you.
See you next time.